Have you ever really thought about that simple piece of paper on your desk? I mean, it seems so ordinary, so everyday, right? But its story? Wow, it is anything but. We're talking about a history packed with secret technologies, dramatic battles, and a revolution that completely changed the world. Okay, let's dive right in and uncover the hidden history of paper. So, if I were to ask you right now, where does paper come from? What would you say? I bet most people would jump straight to Egypt. Papyrus, the pharaohs, all that stuff. And look, that's a great start, but it's not the whole story. Not even close. The real story is way more complex and honestly, a lot more exciting. To really get this, our journey has to start way back, over 5,000 years ago, in the Nile River Valley. And we're not starting with paper, but with its very famous ancestor, papyrus. Now, here's a super important distinction that you might not know. Papyrus isn't technically paper. No, really. It's made by layering and pressing strips of a plant stem together, kind of like laminating them. True paper, on the other hand, is made by taking fibers, totally breaking them down into a watery pulp, and then reforming them into a sheet. It's a completely different technology. The Egyptians had this absolutely brilliant process. They'd slice these thin strips from the Cyprus papyrus plant, soften them up in the muddy waters of the Nile, and then lay them out in a grid at right angles to each other. They'd pound this mat into a single sheet and just let it dry in that hot sun. And what they got was lightweight, it was portable, and it was perfect for everything from keeping records to writing down sacred texts. But the real invention of paper, the paper we know and use today, was actually happening half a world away. And it was a revolutionary secret, one developed in China and kept under lock and key for centuries. That's right, the technology that led directly to the very notebook you write in or the book you read, that all started in China. And this wasn't about just layering plants. This was about completely transforming fibers into something totally new. This tech was so valuable, you can bet they weren't sharing it freely. The knowledge just slowly seeped out, first to places like Vietnam and India, starting around the 3rd century AD. But for it to get all the way to the West, well, something pretty dramatic had to happen. And here it is, that dramatic moment. The big secret of paper wasn't given away, it wasn't sold, it was captured. This is the turning point, the event that would put paper on a collision course with Western history. You can see paper's long, slow march on this timeline. It took hundreds and hundreds of years. But check out that huge jump after 751 AD. See that? That's when everything changed, and it was all thanks to a single battle. So what was this battle all about? Well, during a fight between China's Tang Dynasty and the expanding Abbasid Caliphate, some Chinese papermakers, the ones who knew the secret, were captured. They were taken to Samarkand, and just like that, the cat was out of the bag. The secret was out. Samarkand became this massive new center for paper production, and from there, the technology finally started its journey into Europe. So when paper finally shows up in Europe around the 12th century, it was the perfect invention at the perfect time. It was about to meet its soulmates, an invention that would spark a communication revolution.
See, at the time, Europeans were writing on parchment, and parchment was made from animal skin. It was beautiful, it was durable, but it was incredibly expensive and took forever to make. Then along comes paper, made from cheap old cotton and linen rags. It was a total game changer. For the first time, a writing material was actually affordable.
And then came Gutenberg. His printing press could churn out books and pamphlets on a massive scale, but it needed fuel. It needed something cheap and reliable to print on. Parchment was just way too expensive for mass communication. But paper? Oh, paper was perfect. This partnership right here, this is the birth of the modern printing industry. The demand created by the printing press was just bottomless. Suddenly, everybody needed paper, and the race was on to find better ways to make more of it and to make it a whole lot faster. The supply of old rags just couldn't keep up, so people started experimenting with literally everything they could get their hands on. Straw, cabbage leaves, even, and get this, wasp nests. Yep. But eventually, they landed on the most efficient, most replaceable material of all, wood pulp, from softwood trees like spruce. The core process is still elegantly simple. You shred your material, wood, rags, whatever. You soak and boil it to loosen up the fibers, and then you beat it into this creamy pulp. A framed screen gets dipped into the pulp, catching a super thin layer of those fibers, and that layer is then pressed, dried, and smoothed into a sheet of paper. This whole process got industrialized in the late 18th century,
An inventor named Nicholas Louis Robert, with some help from the Fournier brothers, created a machine that could produce a continuous roll of paper. This automation turned paper production into the massive global industry we know today.
So that brings us to today. We live in this digital world of screens and data, and for years we've been hearing about the paperless office and how the era of paper is coming to an end. But is that really what's happening?
It's the big question, isn't it? I mean, with everything stored in the cloud or on a hard drive, do we even need paper anymore? Well, the source for this explainer has a very firm and maybe surprising answer to that.
Well, when you compare them, it's pretty stark. We all know how fragile digital storage can be. Disks crash, hardware becomes obsolete, and software updates can make old files totally unreadable. But paper is incredibly stable. A well-made book can last for centuries. No updates or new software required.
So, is the paper era over? The source material couldn't be clearer. The answer is most definitely no. In fact, it argues that paper now serves one of its most important functions ever, giving us a convenient and durable way to preserve things for the long haul.
And that leaves us with a really fascinating final thought. In an age where our digital information can just vanish in a blink, has this simple, ancient technology of paper actually become our most reliable, our most permanent way of remembering who we are? It's something to think about the next time you pick up a pen.